Ladies and gentlemen, this is Gail Morgan welcoming you to the Libertarian Counterpoint's Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. You've heard their point, now listen to the counterpoint.
Welcome to Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. We're coming at you on March 10th, 2021. We've survived about 5-6 weeks of the Biden administration. But before we get into any of the show, let me introduce you to our panel. On our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty. He's a retired engineer in the state of California. And in our upper right-hand corner, we have our screaming eagle of freedom, Tim Everett. He is a pilot in the state of California. And I'll be your host. My name is Jason McPhee, and let's jump into the show. So today's show is going to be a little bit different than our normal shows. We're going to kind of focus mostly on the issue of free speech on this particular one, free speech in sort of public places. And that's kind of been a hot topic over the last year. And so we're essentially going to talk a little bit about some of the places where free speech has been under assault, which is mainly the college campuses, but it's sort of been happening in other places as well. And then we're going to jump into Liberty at the Movies, our second installment of that, where we'll look at a scene of free speech, a good scene on free speech from the movie Casablanca. So let's jump right into this. So free speech, we've had all of these issues going on in campuses, especially in the last 4 years or so. People thinking that free speech means that they literally get to call for other people not to be able to speak, I guess, because they feel offended, so they can somehow cancel your speech with their speech. Maybe request that your speech, just isn't allowed because it triggers them or other things like this. And so we have a few pictures. I'm going to just bring those up now. And this particular picture is of an incident at Evergreen campus or Evergreen University in the state of Washington. And that's they apparently have some kind of a weird ritual, which is, I think it's like a day without a black person day. And they decided to change it about a few years ago. They said, let's have day without a white person day instead. And so apparently that was a voluntary thing initially for black people, where they just wanted to show people what life would be like if they didn't show up. And then it essentially became sort of more militant, where they told white people not to show up on that day. And so this was, and it's funny too, because you look at this crowd and looks like there's an awful lot of white people in the crowd, but essentially they're telling Brett Weinstein, this professor here, that he needs to be quiet and leave, even though he's teaching a class, and he had the right to be there, but this was sort of a thing, and so that was one thing. And I think I'll just cycle through these pictures here real quick. There's just a couple images. Now here's an image of Professor Christina Hoff Sommers, and she was giving a lecture at a university, and she gives lectures on issues between, I guess, boys and girls and their representation and stuff. And so I think she thinks, and a lot of times, that boys are being given short shrift in a lot of places nowadays. So these people on rape culture decided to crash her lecture, and essentially they called this their free speech right, to just show up and drown her out inside of a classroom that other people had paid for this class, presumably, and they're there. But anyway, so that was sort of a disinvitation that they had done on Christina Hoff Sommers. And then this is just a scene from a BLM, a recent BLM thing, where a woman in a restaurant was just harassed by this whole BLM mob that came in, and I guess they're just using their speech to just shout at her while she's sitting in there, because I guess she didn't show allegiance to them as they came in. And the funny thing is too, that for BLM, there's an awful lot of white folks here, which is kind of crazy. But anyway, so that's just a few images about kind of where we've been going with some of these speech issues. And so, you guys want to jump in on some of this? And,
it is just somewhat sickening, because what we see in here is the resegregation of our society. This cancel culture that is ongoing, where people believe that they have a right not to be offended, is now segregating us into little tribes. George Wallace in 1963 in his inaugural address said, segregation today, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever. And this attack on free speech is doing exactly that. We are now living the vision of George Wallace, where you can run into a classroom where a teacher is teaching, and you can tell her she cannot speak because I don't like what you are saying. I am offended by what you're saying. So she must now segregate herself and be quiet. You can have people in restaurants who don't show any allegiance to Black Lives Matter or to whoever. They better show the allegiance or they must segregate themselves and be quiet. This is what is happening. Look at this madness on Evergreen campus, which happened. They have a day of absence. And you're right, Jason, it started off, well, blacks will just voluntarily stay off campus. Then they decide, well, no, whites should stay off campus. Not only that they suggested it, they wanted to enforce it. Just like during Jim Crow, that blacks could not go certain places, and they were going to enforce it. And this is what happened at Evergreen. Segregation. That now our thought patterns must be segregated, where blacks could say certain things and whites cannot do the same, or vice versa. Everything is now segregated. And this is the road we are going down now. This cancel culture is leading us into a society where we'll be divided by tribes and we'll be warring at each other. This is frightening. I mean, I've lived my life, but I have a grandson. I don't know what country he's going to be living in if this continues.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't know what I can't add to that necessarily. None of this is good. You don't like what somebody says, you don't have to listen, but they have a right, and they have a right to say what they have to say or what they want to say, especially when they're invited or they're teaching a class. And you don't have the right to interrupt them because you're infringing upon their free speech rights. And, so, it would have been hard for me to stay in my seat with these, I pay to listen to this gal talk, for example, and these kids are up there. It would have been difficult for me to stay in my seat and not walk up there, yank that sign out of their hands, and that the guy wouldn't have hit the girls, but if I had to, I'd slug the guy. I mean, hey, what am I infringing upon your right not to be slugged? Oh, well, what about you infringing on the right of this person trying to talk to the class here? Or what about my right to hear them and not your dumbass? Okay, did I say ass? Oh, I said dumbass.
Are you allowed to say that, Tim?
I don't know. It's a donkey or a, Anyway, so I mean, this is just so maddening. I mean, do they think they're getting their message across? Are they changing minds? Are they influencing people toward their point of view? I seriously doubt it unless you're dumb as a rock already, in which case you don't have a point of view. And so if someone influences you, what difference does it make? You never had one in the first place. So, I mean, this is 100% wrong and 0% right, all this stuff. Well, I challenge anyone to show me how this, and you have to convince me. And you have to do it without infringing on my rights, to show me why this is good. This whole thing, all this stuff, people infringing upon other people's rights to sit in a restaurant that they are paying to sit in and eat the food there, right. to eat peaceably, to go to a class, to listen to or to teach a class. You're gonna have that's going to be an uphill battle to convince me that there is some good in any of that.
Well, Tim, I think some of this means that we really have to get down to the principles of when people really have free speech and when they shouldn't expect necessarily to have free speech. To me, it seems like a lot of this is based upon whether or not you're on private property or whether you're in the commons. And in this particular case, I mean, this person is in a restaurant and they're just enjoying a meal. And, the restaurant didn't give these people the permission to come in there and just inject their noise over everybody. These people just took it upon themselves to do it. And same thing with this class, too, with this Christina Hoff Sommers. I mean, people had paid for the privilege to be in there to hear her. And that's what they were there for. And the idea that people think they have the right to just invade that association and be able to push their view. Now, if this had been out in the commons, if people were just talking in a park and people just happened to show up and, nobody had particular right, to be there, that trumped anybody else's, then I guess, maybe things are kind of fair game. But this is really, like you said, you paid
I don't think so. I don't agree. If I was at a park listening to a speaker speak on some conservative or whatever issue, or even a progressive issue, and then somebody else on the other side came along and disrupted that, I didn't pay any money, and I'm in a common area. It's a public park, for example. No, I don't think they have the right to shout over the person that's there first. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Regardless whose side it's on. To me, it's just a basic principle that if somebody has something to say without shouting, I guess the only salient point here is that it's done without shouting over the top of somebody else that's trying to say something.
Well, let's jump into
it's not Battle of the Bands or.
Well, I tell you what. Speaking of Battle of the Bands, we have our new movie clip here that we wanted to do, and it's called "Liberty at the Movies." This is our second try at this, and so essentially this time we are going to do the movie Casablanca, and so in Casablanca, it's an interesting movie about essentially World War II and, sort of a resistance issue against the Nazis, people coming to this area that sort of occupied France, and they're trying to get out essentially to evade the Nazis and get out of there so that they can, go to areas that are free. But anyways, there are some instances in here that have some kind of interesting lessons, interesting takes on liberty. And that's kind of what we want to do in this segment, is to pull your attention to some of these old movies and show you what we think are kind of some really interesting ideas, on liberty that are brought out here, and maybe, bring these movies back alive so you can maybe go back and relook at them in another take. But so anyways, we have a trailer. Let's go through the trailer real quick so that people can kind of get on board with what the movie's about. Roll trailer.
On his way to America.
So that was just a little bit of a trailer just to get everybody kind of in what the movie's about. And like I said, it takes place occupied France. This Victor Laszlo is sort of...
It's not France. Well,
yeah,
it's in Morocco. It's not in Morocco, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So anyways, and this guy Rick, played by Humphrey Bogart, he owns this bar that a lot of stuff happens at. And so anyways, the resistance leader, played by Paul Heinrich, he is essentially the Nazis are essentially trying to get him back to Nazi territory so they can, do some bad things to him, presumably. But anyways, while they're in this territory, technically the French have authority still. And so they happen to, this particular scene that we want to bring up, this is kind of a real free speech issue, I think. And they're in Rick's place, the sort of happening place, and the Germans are there, and the French authorities are there, and a lot of people are there. And at this one point in the movie, the German Nazis who are in the bar decide they want to start singing the German national anthem, and which is kind of offensive to a lot of the people who are, there, who have been victimized by the German government. So let's jump into that clip real quick, and then we can talk about it.
Okay.
Roll. So what did you guys think of that particular scene?
Well, first of all, the comedy movie, Those Magnificent Men and Their Flying Machines, they did a similar thing with the French and the Germans, with the national anthem and one singing over the top of the other, which happened in England, kind of neutral territory at the time. But anyway, it's kind of like Black Lives Matter comes into the restaurant and starts bothering the guests, and then the guests all somehow outnumber them, and they get up and shove all the Black Lives Matter people back out into the street. I think that's kind of what's going on here, because in a sense, the Germans were the invaders, so they're in the invaded part of the world, right? That was in France during World War II.
No, it was in Morocco during World War II.
Oh, Morocco.
French Morocco. Yeah.
French Morocco. Yeah, French
I
Morocco,
see.
yes.
Okay. So they were there. The Germans were there as conquerors then, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so, if they get drowned out, I mean, I can see that the Germans may have had the free speech to sing. That's fine, but the French did too, I guess. Here, one wins over the other. One has a band, the other, and more people. So there you go. So to the victor go the spoils.
Well, I think the scene raised some good issues. This whole thing about cancel culture. But, this is cancel culture in reverse, which to us is a good thing, right? Because this was a case of good speech drowning out bad speech. But what if the reverse had happened, though? What if the bad speech had won in this particular case? How would we view this? Because it will still be a competition between good speech and bad speech. In that case, cancel culture would have won. So is it that if we're on private property, this is okay? And if we're in the commons, like we were talking about previously, it is not, or vice versa?
Well, Leo,
because,
yeah.
Go ahead, Jason, go ahead.
Well, that's what I was trying to get at a little bit earlier, I think. And that's the idea that whether you're in a commons or on private property. Now, in this case, it's kind of a weird case because it's a bar. And I guess the expectation was that people could, sing, I guess, if they wanted to when nobody else was. And so these, Nazis had gotten together and started singing the national anthem. And that was kind of putting a damper on everybody else. But when Paul Heinrich comes in and he tells the band to strike up the French national anthem, even he tells them to do it. But it's funny, the band leaders actually look to Humphrey Bogart, who owns the place, and he gives them the nod that they can go ahead and do it. So it's sort of a private property issue where hey, they had the right to do this, but they're also it's a freedom of speech. I mean, it's good speech canceling out the bad speech, right? Everybody just joins in with the speech they want to hear instead of these uninvited people who just started singing. And, they just say, hey, this stuff isn't really going over very well. I don't know. That was my take on it, anyways.
Yeah.
Well, it's a thumbs up for good speech canceling out bad speech. Okay, there's a thumbs up for it without a doubt. But my issue is, what if the reverse had happened? It's on private property. What if the reverse had happened? How would we view that? Is it that everybody have the right to speak in this environment, and is everybody have the right to be offended in this environment? Where I don't know where we would draw the lines. I mean, I'm glad of the outcome. But I am not sure about what are the rules of the game.
Looks like Leon's speech has been frozen.
It's been canceled.
There Leon, you're back, I think.
Oh wow, gosh, it's like I'm having a LSD hallucination or something.
Well, I guess
you guys hear me now?
Yeah, we hear you now. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know. So do you think I'm saying what are the rules in terms of where we draw the line on this thing?
But
everybody has a right of free speech. Well, this is of course not the United States, but everybody has a right of free speech, and everybody also have to respect other people's right to speak, even when their speech is offensive. But the Supreme Court have given us boundaries of what is free speech and what is not. So where are the lines drawn is what in this culture environment, if we are looking at this movie as a good example of how to take care of cancer culture, where do we draw the lines if the result was reversed? This is what I'm having a little bit of question about, even though I like the outcome.
Yeah, but Leon, that was, I think, why it was such a critical point that the band looked to Humphrey Bogart, who owned the place, to figure out whether or not they should be able to start playing right then. And then he gave them the okay. So he was the property owner, private property. So he kind of gets to decide what speech is going to go on.
Now, I'll bet he was paying their paychecks too.
True.
Okay. Well, you know what? Because I don't want to run out of time here. So we have another clip, and we'll forget the Knucklehead Noise Patrol. We have something funny at the end of this anyway. So, there's another scene here that goes beyond speech, but has to do with our lockdowns that we've been involved in. And I think you'll enjoy this next clip. So let's roll the next clip. I couldn't resist that scene and just followed the other scene. And boy, did that speak to our lockdown. Do you guys have any thoughts on that?
No,
you were supposed to say that. No, I was going to ask, who was that Nazi? We saw the... Can you back up a little bit, Jay? I was going to say, who was that Nazi? We saw we had Humphrey Bogart, Paul Heinrich, and James. Can you back up to that scene, that clip, real quick there? Because we were wondering who was playing the Nazi. Can you back? Oh gosh, I thought that was him. It's Gavin. The one who wanted to shut the place down.
Oh yes, the one to shut the place down, without a doubt.
Oh my gosh!
Okay, you guys.
The extreme example of government interfering in our lives to the extent that they could just make up reasons as to why they're going to shut us down. If it's not COVID, it's because there's gambling in the place. And of course, notice that the government. Notice that the government official is enjoying the winnings of the gambling that he's now decrying.
Oh gosh, that was a good one. That took me by surprise.
Couldn't resist.
I see.
It's a good one. It's a good one, Jason. Yeah. But I mean, it does raise a lot of issues about arbitrary government. Making rules so arbitrary based on nothing other than the whims of some government official. It really and truly, it really leaves you wondering about the power of an intrusive government. And we are seeing that here in the United States. Government have become so intrusive that it can tell us when to stay home, when to go out. They're saying that there's a public health emergency, so we have to abide by their rules.
Almost like they're a bunch of Nazis, right?
Yeah, almost like they're exactly. They are overlords or Nazi overlords, I guess. It was unbelievable.
We were worried that was always going to come from the federal government, and lo and behold, the power-hungry governors of these, it always seems to be the Democratic governors are just crazy. They've gone nutcase, and there's nothing seemingly. What can we do about it? Apparently nothing really.
And to see the media is going along with this, the media is going along with this. They'll criticize Ron DeSantis for trying to keep his state open, but they're praising Andrew Cuomo and Gavin Newsom for closing down our state.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well. Gosh, this is we're just living through terrible times, but hopefully you can go back and enjoy that movie Casablanca, and catch a few ideas about liberty in that movie that you might not have spotted before. And we plan to do a few more of those in the future too. So hopefully You can.
I can't get that vision of Gavin Newsom out of my head playing the German officer. They have ways of dealing with you and making you talk.
Well, on that note, we will see you at the next one. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you later.
Thank you for watching the Knuckleheads of Liberty. Listen each week in Sacramento on Comcast Channel 17 for Knuckleheads of Liberty on Monday at 5:30 p.m. and the Libertarian Counterpoint show on Thursday at 8 p.m. Also on YouTube, Facebook, and podcasts everywhere. We invite you to come again next week for the Libertarian Counterpoint Productions.